So, ladies and gentlemen, our next guest here on the red couch of DVZ is Bernie Hart. He's the Vice President of Customs and Trade Business Development at Flexport from the US. Bernie, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Bernie, I mean, everybody's talking about tariffs, all that kind of stuff. I can imagine trade business development is running pretty good at the moment because everybody needs to know about tariffs.
They certainly do. Everything we thought we knew is kind of being challenged right now. Everybody is being asked for more and more data. There's more and more dates. And when I say dates, it used to be every time you imported into a country, you paid your duties, taxes, and fees based on the entry date that you brought it into the country. Now it's transit date, what time did it leave the foreign port. There's a lot of additional variables business need to be concerned with and make sure they're reporting correctly because it affects their duty rate.
But what's the rationale behind that? Why didn't they just stick to the one date everybody was used to?
Yeah, so this all started obviously in the United States with the Trump administration that's there today. And what he ended up doing was rolling out a bunch of executive orders. And in these executive orders, he changed tariffs. It's Liberation Day. It's been called a lot of things. But basically, he introduced a lot of complexity to the overall process. And I say complexity, it's based on the export date, the import date, and then the individual tariff rates are being applied at much more of a granular level. You and I were talking just about this couch by way of example, and it all depends on the costed bill of material for this couch, where you're importing it from, and then understanding each of those components and what duty rate for each of those components. Because if they do happen to have steel or aluminum is one of the big areas. So if this couch has springs that are steel or aluminum, you have to call those out now and then pay an individualized duty rate on it. It got very, very complex very quickly.
I mean, how do your customers react to that? I mean, you are helping them with customs brokerage, but you're also a traditional forwarding company, so you transport the stuff for them. Are they just asking for advice, or are they front-loading, holding the cargo back somewhere at the origin, or how are they coping with this whole situation?
Yeah, so each company has developed their own strategy as to how they want to approach this. It does depend on the industry that they're in, how forward can they order their products, do they have inventory already in the country, in the United States? So each of them is taking on their own unique view for this, but everybody is really looking at what is my true net landed cost. So where it used to be, you could bring in this couch from Asia by way of example, you'd pay a duty rate on it. Now this couch, if it's got steel and aluminum, IEEPA tariffs and stuff associated with it, you could have 4 or 5 different line items, each with their own unique tariff on it. So it used to be 4 or 5%, it now could be 150%, it could be 30%. So what you planned your business on and what actually executes could be very, very different. So your actual net landed cost is what businesses are really looking for so that we can get them that data and information so that they can better plan not only for their costs to the end consumer, but also their manufacturing, their assembly lines. That whole process now needs to be, it always was tied together, but now it's under a microscope.
I mean, what kind of advice would you give with your experience from the last couple of months? How should companies act? I mean, should they just stay a little bit cool because everything changes so fast anyway? Should they, I don't know, react really fast on the other hand, or what should they do?
Yeah, so we're encouraging all clients to, again, they always should be focused on net landed cost. That's kind of point one, but you've really got 3 levers with international trade. The first lever is the harmonized tariff schedule. So what is the classification? That determines pretty much everything. Your duty rate, duty rate. It also determines other government agencies, if it's anti-dumping, countervailing duty. So you always need to know your classification. Okay, it determines duty rate, but also admissibility out of a country and then into a country. The second piece is country of origin. There's a lot of businesses out there that are like, we don't want to have our product coming from China, so let's ship it from China to Singapore and then bring it into the US with the country of origin of Singapore. That's not how it works. You have to be able to substantiate whether or not substantial transformation actually took place to change the country of origin. So country of origin is crucial for everybody to understand that and understand how it's going to be declared to customs. And then the third element happens to be valuation. So what is the actual value of the product that's going to come in? Is it the price paid or payable? Can you represent it a little bit lower than that through a duty minimization, duty avoidance program called First Sale? Just as one example, to bring that in at a lower entered value so you pay lower duties, taxes, and fees.
What's your experiences? Do your customers have these kind of data on hand?
Some do. Some it's a little bit of a challenge. And by a little bit of a challenge is we're coming back and asking them now, do you have a costed bill of material? And they're like, well, why do you need that? And I was like, well, if I have it, this is what we can do, and this is what your duty rate will be. If I can't get that substantiation, then I'm going to have to apply it to the total value of the goods, and you could end up paying more. So really, businesses are hyper-focused now on duty minimization, duty avoidance, and that's classification, country of origin, and value.
I mean, I think around Transport Logistics Fair, you are presenting a new solution, AI-based solution, I think. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. What exactly is that, and how can it help the customers in these kind of situations?
Yeah, so actually today we're calling it a tariff calculator, and it's free on our website. And it's to the United States to start off with, but we will roll that to other countries. And what you can do is go in and look up an HTS number, actually put in your HTS number, and then what it's going to show you is this is the cost, the duties, taxes, and fees, if you bring this into the United States. And then for the individual components, like the steel and aluminum, you can go through and set the actual percentage. And when you set the percentage, it'll recalculate the tariffs associated with it. So you kind of get real-time access. And then it'll also show you if there's multiple sources of supply. The example we were using was this couch. If you can bring it in from China, Taiwan, Vietnam, it'll show you the different breakouts of other countries where you could potentially source this from, where others are buying it from, and see what the duty rate is on that. So it gives you a very interactive approach with the latest and greatest information.
Do you already see this multi-sourcing, not only sourcing, let's say, from China like it was in the past, that they really diversified their supply chains?
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing that more and more. And it was interesting. The first time this presidency was in office back in 2017, there was a focus on China. And I would be telling people, oh, just try and get out of China, try and diversify out of China. Now, I can't pick a country to tell them to go to because there is nothing, I don't want to say safe, but every one of these countries could have additional higher duty rates. So you really need to stay on top of it. That's why this tariff calculator, we think, is going to be valuable in the industry.
Maybe you can give us an impression how this whole topic is discussed in the US. Is there an impression that eventually there will be all these great deals for the US, but also for other countries, maybe let's say US and Europe, that they will really find a deal where there's pretty much no tariffs anymore? Or how is it discussed? What's the mood pretty much in the US?
Yeah, so the mood in the US is pretty much the way it is international. Everybody is really hyper-focused on what is this going to mean kind of long-term for the overall industry. Now, if you just think about it with all of the countries, 50 some odd countries plus where these reciprocal tariffs have been placed, each one of them has to have their own agreement, and then their agreements can change and change and change. So the one thing I can tell you is expect change. You just need to stay on top of it and continue to do not only the calculations associated with it, but also your sources of supply. What and how flexible is your supply chain to be able to move it?
Is AI and digitization overall also able to pretty much help with maybe redirecting really your trade flows? I mean, calculating the tariff correctly is the one side, but the other side would be maybe I have to act in a broader way. Let's say.
Yeah. And from an AI perspective, what you really want to understand is if you're bringing in specific products, a specific classification, you want to understand are others in the industry bringing in similar products, similar HTS numbers, where are their sources of supply, and maybe that's a new vendor, a new manufacturer that you didn't know of or weren't aware of previously, that AI can help you with now to say, hey, yeah, you're bringing this stuff in from Vietnam today, but did you know there's 7 other sources of supply where that same HTS number is coming in? Your product could have unique characteristics where you have to stay with a sole source situation. Those businesses are pretty stuck, but they're all looking for different ways that they can manufacture their process, maybe spread it out amongst multiple countries. So whereas the old model used to be pick a source of supply, have as much done as you possibly can there and bring it in, that whole process is now not only being challenged, but there's great financial benefit if you can streamline it.
I mean, if we talk about Flexport strategy a little bit, I mean, how do you cope with that? You could really focus on this whole topic of tariffs now, which are geared towards US and all that kind of stuff, really concentrate on that. On the other hand, maybe long term, you have to also think about, could the world trade arena pretty much evolve a bit around the US, because other people will eventually switch their supplies, all that kind of stuff, and maybe trade with each other without the US. How do you cope with that situation?
Yeah. So what we're encouraging businesses do is not only the US, we think there's going to be a reciprocal effect around the world with a lot of countries responding. So the way you start international trade is the closed loop process. It starts with the purchase order, an international purchase order, and ends with final mile delivery. So what we're encouraging businesses to do is go back to square one, your purchase order process, really understand what your true net landed cost is, and then understand what your different sources of supply are, and then build your manufacturing process around that as much as you can. Some of these businesses, some of these industries are very capital intense. They put billion-dollar factories in place. Those don't change overnight. So those are going to be a little bit more, let's just call them status quo. Whereas anybody else that has more of a dynamic supply chain will be better off positioned. And as long as you can move along with favorable duty rates around the world, the better position you're going to be if your supply chain allows that to happen.
Maybe final question. I mean, President Trump said his most loved word is tariffs. Do you already dream of tariffs?
I do dream of tariffs, probably in a much different way. It's very, very interesting because this industry, of course, you're in it as well. But when you think about international trade, what happened over the last, I will call it the last probably decade, especially with e-commerce and this process called de minimis, we took international trade and we kind of turned it into fast food to where me as a consumer, you know, if I want to buy that jacket, if I want to buy this couch, I can get on the internet, I can order that. I really don't care if it's coming from a foreign country or not. Everything kind of happens behind the scenes. Now, everybody, it's become a dinner time topic, tariffs. And, you know, what are we going to do to minimize our tariffs so that we as importers, consumers, pay the least amount possible associated with it. So it's really taken international trade, tariffs, and put it under a spotlight, but I think in kind of a good way for people to look at it, not obviously for the chaos that it's causing right now, but it's really taking the world a deeper look into international trade, really understanding where your source of supply is and how you're consuming that on the final end.
Do you see that this will be rewinded a little bit, this fast food, world trade as a fast food? If we think about this whole e-commerce business we all know with Temu, Shein, all that kind of stuff, you think that will be rewinded a little bit?
Yeah, I think everybody has to look at their business model. I won't get into specific companies, but everybody has to look at their business model and then figure out what makes the most sense. It used to be the supply chain was executing really in a real-time environment. It would go from the warehouse in the foreign country and then get delivered to the final end consumer. Now you have to think about, do I need to have inventory in country and fulfill from there? Because I already know what my duties, taxes, and fees are. Because by the time the supply chain executes, if it's an ocean and if it's 4 to 6 weeks, it could change dramatically in that process.
Yeah, it's crazy times, and
it's
always very good to have some experts on hand like yourself, Bernie.
Yeah,
thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.